Back when it felt like horror games weren't in any AAA developer's focus, there's a surprising rise in indie horror games, and it is extremely clear where they got their fame from. Yeah, Let's Play channels and indie horror games were kind of a match made in algorithm heaven. You had content creators banking off long videos, and indie horror games would produce moments where said content creators could overreact and produce funny moments. With that being said, a lot of these indie horror games were actually pretty unique, and on top of that, very memorable to me and a real sign of the times. Either way, that's enough rambling. Let's overreact to some classic indie horror games. Starting off with a game that I very much remember, One Late Night. As a free indie horror game, it looked legit, and as someone who worked overnight shifts in some pretty empty office spaces, I can say it nails the vibe of being at an office late at night. When you're in this environment, there's never complete silence, whether it's a printer, an instant coffee being made, or an elevator being called to a random floor. There's always something in the background. I think One Late Night really gets this. It almost feels like complete silence wouldn't be as creepy. With that being said, of course, this isn't just an empty office you get to explore. Right off the bat, the game hits you with some creepy messages as you wander off for some coffee. After this, some generic spooky paranormal stuff starts to happen. Knocks at doors, chairs move, weird creepy phone calls. You get it, the basic stuff. The game doesn't really have a story, more just a line of tasks that you have to do while random creepy things happen. And to be fair, for a free indie horror game that's not really meant to take up too much time, I think that kind of works for the best in this short experience. Don't overcomplicate things, just put the player in an uncomfortable situation and throw scary shit at them. The monster is just a lady in a black dress, which again does just enough to work for me. I like this one, it gets a pass from me. So, what did the studio do after this? Well, they actually went on to develop a sequel. I haven't played it, but reading the reviews, it sounds like it kind of ruins the whole thing that made the first one good. Other than that though, the studio actually has made a handful of other games not really connected to this franchise, so hey, good on them I guess. But like I said, this was a short and sweet spooky experience, and for the time it worked well. It would give you those jump scares that would produce those overreaction that you could throw in any thumbnail and probably get a few dozen clicks. But it does work. If you have a little bit of free time, this game doesn't take long to finish, and if you're in the mood for a quick jump scare like the old days, I definitely recommend this one. Continuing on the trend of short and sweet, Stairs is just as simple as the name implies. You start walking down some stairs until reaching a door. Opening it takes you to a psychedelic horror experience. Almost from the start, you hear these distant chatter of others pleading for help. The game takes place in some underground bunker with not a lot of context why you got there or even exactly where this is. The standout to this game for me is the voice acting. For a free indie horror game, it's really well done. Visually, nothing is off either. The game doesn't even throw any jump scares at you, and for this time, that's actually pretty crazy to say. The only thing that's really terrible to me is the gameplay. With only 20 minutes, it's really just like a teaser of an experience. Which isn't really an issue when, like I said, all you want is a small little spooky experience, but it did have me feeling a little empty as I felt like there could be a lot more in this one, especially with the voice acting being as good as it is. So, what were the developers doing after this? Greylight, the studio that made Stairs, they actually made it into a full game. Well, sorta. They made a more expansive story with a pretty interesting premise. The game is on Steam and with just a glance looks a lot more complete than the 20-minute demo sorta we got. With that being said, Stairs wasn't a bad experience by any stretch of the imagination. Maybe just a little short, overall still gets a pass from me. Ah yeah, Slender the 8 Pages. I made another video covering these a little bit more in depth, but I feel like I should mention them as they kind of kickstarted the trend, or at least got it more into the mainstream. Slender the 8 Pages and other Slender games were the most basic form of an indie horror game. It gives you a straight up task and throws a creepy monster that follows you around to deliver those juicy jump scares. The game didn't look great, and I think that actually helped it in a way. It was able to run on pretty much any sort of hardware that you had, so there was almost no like entry to barrier. You didn't need a super rig to play this very basic spooky game. Other than that, you had some various other Slender clones that try to take the same concept, change it up a little bit, put you in a different location, sometimes put you in the daytime, which didn't make much sense, but nonetheless, you had Slender Man chasing you around. Other than that, you had a great SCP containment breach game. You had The Rake, which was another creepypasta game. But all these games, like I said, I did cover already in a video, so go check that one out if you're more interested in the creepypasta games of the time. They were great. They sort of led this whole thing, but yeah, go ahead and check those ones out too. Alright, easily probably the most popular game I have talked about so far. Aoni is an RPG maker horror game, which doesn't even sound like a thing, but man, was this game popular. While doing some research for the video, I found out there are 2 fucking movies in Japan based on this game. I genuinely don't know how to take this news. And on top of movies, there is an official novel and multiple sequels, even having a fucking battle royale spin-off. I feel like I stumbled on a lot of information I was not supposed to. I feel like I fell down the Aoni Blue Demon rabbit hole and I can't find my own way out. This is terrifying information, and unfortunately I will have to live with this for the rest of my life. Well, with that all out of the way, how's the actual game? It had to be something else to spawn all of this, right? Well, yeah, this game was actually really interesting for the time, taking survival horror, jump scares, and tense moments and making it work in an RPG Maker game. Well, I guess we can just start with the story, which starts off very basic. You hear of a monster living in a mansion in a remote area. As the main character, you and 3 friends decide to go check it out. And obviously this is a horror game, so it doesn't take long for this to go very bad. After running through the house, you end up discovering one of your friends has been killed. Following this, you rendezvous with another one of your friends, and she turns into one of the Onis, which is Blue Demon, I'm pretty sure, translated. You run into the basement and witness another one of your friends commit suicide right in front of you. Before you can even process this, he turns into an Oni as well. Also, if I'm pronouncing Aoni wrong, I'm sorry. I looked it up, and almost every video I watched or heard it read, it was pronounced differently, so I'm trying my best here. After this, you get chased by a group of these Onis, and after you flee the group of monsters, our main character makes a statement on never seeing his friends or the monsters ever again. Short, sweet, decent story at the end. I guess decent enough to spawn a novel, 2 movies, and everything else. This game was free, which again meaning no hard way to access it, and it was being played by just about every Let's Player at the time. And the actual gameplay carried this one. Being chased down by the demon genuinely felt tense. His weird distorted look works well for him, at first step. Looking at him too much, he just kinda looks funny, but the short moments where he's just chasing you can't quite focus on him, make him feel terrifying. Aoni was an incredibly unique take on RPG horror games, even with the story lacking a bit, worth the play if for the gameplay, and the premise if it sounds interesting to you. But from what I've been seeing, don't watch the movies as they don't have great reviews anywhere I saw. But hey, the monsters look terrifying, not like scary, but like, why was this rendered? I don't know why they did this. I guess Aoni has a huge pull in Japan. Oh boy, saving one of my favorites for last, a horror game with a retro style pixelated graphics. This has to be one of the more basic indie horror games. Well, yeah, on the surface level this game doesn't bring too much to the table, and I genuinely wouldn't blame you for not being taken back by this game at first. And honestly, it's not even in the game that makes it unique, it's what it does outside of the game. It's after the game's first jump scare does it really start to shine. The game crashes, and within the folder that you have the game installed, a new file appears. It's crazy to me because if after this first crash you just like gave up, you would have never seen any of this. The new file is called attention. After reading the note, you're giving a password of whiteface. Booting up the game again, you're now greeted with an entirely different start. This pattern sort of continues until you get to the last chapter, all ending in the player committing suicide after being chased by the creature that is Whiteface. Seeing game files just appear after the game crashes is pretty jarring. On top of that, the visuals are beautiful. Like I said, the game shines more outside of the game than inside the game. And of course, being a bit older now, it all kind of makes sense how it happened, but being a very young kid at the time playing it, this shit didn't make sense to me. A little young me couldn't fathom how this was happening. Well, anyway, what is Ivan Zanotti, if I pronounced that wrong again, sorry, the creator of the game, been up to? Well, on top of remaking I'm Scared, he actually has a handful of other games that all look pretty good for relatively cheap. So go check it out if you want. Alright, I know there are hundreds of other indie horror games out there that I didn't mention. And hell, if one comes to mind, drop in the comments and maybe I'll make a follow-up to this video covering some more. Truthfully, I even missed out on a lot of games that I want to talk about. Cry of Fear, Afraid of Monsters, Get a Life, A Black Plague, and so forth. Unfortunately, researching for this video takes a lot of watching old PewDiePie Let's Plays, and goddamn, can only one man take so much old PewDiePie Let's Plays. Until next time, bros. Ah, fuck!